live, Two Hotheads, where activism happens. We have on the phone Ben Wikler. Am I saying your name right, Ben?
Ben Wikler, that's right.
You host a radio show with Aaron Swartz?
I host a radio show where Aaron used to be the founding producer, and now he's, it's dedicated to him.
I was listening to some of the shows. I love your show. It sounded really good. You're doing a lot of activism, working with a lot of different activists. I wanted to talk to you about the protests that have been going on, about the bills, about your relationship with Aaron.
Listen, I appreciate it, and what you guys do with using radio to lift up and support activists making a real difference in the world. That's exactly the same vision that we have. I guess now I have with my show, and I really appreciate what you guys do.
Tell us about your show.
So the show is called The Flaming Sword of Justice, and the name actually is something I came up with a long time ago. I was Al Franken's producer on his radio show on Air America.
Huh, that's cool.
Wow.
Thanks.
That's pretty cool.
I appreciate it. So that was my proposal to him about what we should call that show. But Al had this kind of battle going on with Bill O'Reilly, and his show was called The O'Reilly Factor. So Al called his show The O'Franken Factor.
Oh, that's funny. So
years later, I got to know Aaron. He and I were both working for activist groups in offices right next to each other, and our office, we were in this kind of former fraternity house just off of Harvard Square that now is called the Democracy Center, and a bunch of different activist groups work out of there. And there's a hole in the wall, so Aaron could hear everything I was I was saying on the phone, and we kind of got to know each other that way. And pretty soon found out we had a lot in common. And we started talking about this, this idea that you could use, not just kind of email and other kind of online organizing techniques, but potentially radio and broadcast and other kinds of stuff to mobilize people and get them to take action. And he, somewhere in the middle of this conversations, registered FlamingSwordOfJustice.com, and we started getting serious about it. And in 2011, he moved to New York. I moved to New York. We got some funding from Avaz.org, the activist group where I was working, and we started really developing it into a thing.
That was, I mean,
awesome.
It sounds really good, and then you listen to it, it's a good show. I liked the show that I listened to, and it was about a lot of activism that happened in Australia.
Yeah.
Tell us about Aaron. Tell us more about what kind of individual he was.
So Aaron was one of the most amazing people I've ever met, and I think everyone who's met him, basically says the same thing. He was somebody, first of all, who was fascinated. He wasn't just fascinating, he was fascinated by everything. He was super curious, and when he met you, he would, the first thing he'd sort of want to find out is what you were interested in and what you knew about, and then he'd start asking you great questions about it. So immediately you'd assume that, his particular interest in the world was whatever you're interested in. It was in, marijuana law reform or whatever. And then you'd discover that he had the same level of depth of interest in just about everything.
Yeah.
The second thing you'd find out with him is that he didn't just want to learn things. He wanted to change, everything that needed to be changed. He felt this, both a kind of excitement and passion and also a really heavy sense of responsibility. He knew that he had, he had skills that could be helpful for making a difference in the world, and he just was totally dedicated on using everything at his disposal, using all of his time. He'd made a chunk of money when he was a teenager selling Reddit to Condé Nast, this big publishing company, and he lived like a monk, basically. He lived in a tiny room his whole life, sometimes in someone's closet, and used all his money basically to support his efforts to change the world. And the third thing was just how talented he was at doing it. He had a kind of a fearlessness, which in retrospect was, it's painful to think about. But he had, he would just jump into things. He wouldn't hesitate. And, I know for me, I'd been kicking this idea for a show around for a long time, and he basically talked me out of being afraid of anything that could happen with it. And we went for broke. And he had that effect on so many different people. It was one of his kind of like unsung gifts to the world is that he helped so many other people do whatever they're doing in the world, not just the things he did himself.
Yeah, that's a great message.
That is
a great way
message.
to live.
It's yeah.
It really is. I mean, one of the things that was amazing about Aaron is that he had a way of leading by example. So if you spent much time with him, you would just want to live up to his standards, which were incredibly high. But you wouldn't want to do things selfishly. You wouldn't want to do things, the easy way if it wouldn't really make a difference. One thing in activism that I'm sure you're familiar with is often with activists, it's easy to tell yourself a story about how you're making a difference on something. And Aaron, challenged himself and everyone around him to go beyond that and really figure out whether it was working. And if something wasn't working, to try something else. He just didn't stop. And that's something that, I think, for all of us who are dedicated to really making a difference in the world, holding ourselves to that standard and that kind of rigor is a really important thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The testing. You got to test yourself. That doesn't mean,
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. People need to test themselves.
I'm curious about what you would say his main passion was, right? Was it information? Was it giving people the ability to understand and know things about the world around them, or was there something more?
He cared a lot about information, and I think when he was younger, he would have called that his sort of central fight. But over time, I spent a lot of time with him from sort of 2009 until I saw him last 2 days before his death. We were going to have dinner on the day that he died, that he took his own life.
Wow.
And in that time, my experience of him was that he was really passionate about something a lot bigger, which is essentially, stepping back. He wrote a thing called, he wrote a piece once called The Generalist Manifesto, and what he argued in it is that, there's a lot of specialists out there, but there aren't enough people who actually step back and think, what is the most important thing I can be doing? What are the most important fights? And in a way, he was kind of issue neutral. What he cared about was, injustice and human suffering in general. And so while I was working with him and spending time with him, he did stuff. He was programming tools to help activists in, repressive countries like in the Middle East with the Arab Spring so that they could get online and exchange information. But he was also fighting for universal health care and, fighting for reform of the financial system. He was doing a huge research project on drug policy reform and talking to experts around the world. That's something that, that hasn't seen the light, but something he was working on a lot in his last months. He was working on, he had a capacity to work on more things than most people will in their lifetime in a single year. And he was applying that sort of across the board. And one thing, when you're working on that many things, you start getting interested in not just the things themselves, but how you can accelerate the pace of change. So he was actually building a software toolkit where, he was incorporating these sort of machine learning techniques so that you could, send an email for an online petition and quickly figure out what was taking off and what wasn't and improve the toolkit itself. He was trying to figure out how, essentially use artificial intelligence to make activism faster and smarter.
That's
because
awesome.
He knew there was so much to do at once.
So what are some of the examples of of the types of tools that he made for people say in the Arab Spring and stuff? Because I know some heard things about people going over there and making sure they would they would have pop up networks and stuff where people could communicate with one another, and it was pretty hairy. What about that kind of specific technological kind of stuff?
Sure. Yeah. So he had a project called HTTPS Anywhere, which is pretty simple. It's not the most secure thing, but it's a lot better than normal. HTTPS is basically if you go to a website and it says HTTP, that means the information you transmit, if you fill out a form or sign a petition or whatever, that's transmitted unencrypted. So anyone who's snooping on your Wi-Fi network can just read it. HTTPS adds a layer of encryption. S is for secure or something like that. And HTTPS Anywhere basically forces every website you go to, if it can handle it, it forces every website you visit to use that secure channel. And so he created a browser extension for that and was figuring out how to apply it to more stuff. He had another thing called Tor to Web. Tor is a encryption tool that allows people to communicate with a pretty high degree of security, but it's complicated to use. So people have to download the software and install it, and mostly regular people don't use it. But Tor to Web made it possible to do Tor through a web browser. And that basically,
I have that on my phone.
Making this accessible to anyone.
I have that Tor product on my phone.
Yeah, a lot
of
people. That's what they're using now too.
Yeah, it's not that hard, and now you don't even have to root your phone, which is really
cool.
Exactly. Yeah,
and that's that was the kind of those weren't his main project. Those were just things he was doing, among other stuff. He would just whenever he saw something that he thought he could build or do, he would do it. Like for our radio show, I was trying to find a radio clock, and I didn't want to pay the money to buy one, but I couldn't find an app that did it. So Aaron sat down and about half an hour made a radio clock that we use to record the show every day.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Nice.
Man, that's what we all need to be more like that. And
oh my God, I know.
Well, it's like a teacher, or like, kind of like someone who's just that a little bit ahead of the curve to the point where they're inspiring to you. You know what I mean? And they're just so dedicated to the cause of just humanity, right?
Yeah,
and,
that's exactly it.
That's wow. That's really something. It really is to have to be like that.
Yeah, and it makes it all the harder to lose them now.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of the challenge to all of us is to try to learn from what made him so amazing and great. Try to carry that torch.
Exactly.
Speaking of carrying the torch, what do you think about these laws, the Aaron's bill? And do you think it's going to pass? Does it have a good chance of getting? I mean, it seems like it's starting to get some support now.
I think it has a shot. I think there's kind of two key things for Aaron's Law. So, and first I'll say, Aaron's Law, it's important. It should pass. It's one of a bunch of things that should happen, and it doesn't do everything that needs to happen, but it's a lot better than not having it. So, to lay that out. But I would say there's two key things to making this happen. The first one is that the companies there's kind of two main potential opponents. One is the sort of prosecutor community, the Department of Justice.
Yep.
They like having power to go after anyone they want. And the way that we can turn that around is pressure on the government. Like the Obama administration feeling the heat, so the Department of Justice is pulled back a little bit from lobbying hard against us on the Hill. The second key thing is companies. Because what happens is a lot of tech companies, when they start out, almost all tech companies are breaking this law in one way or another. They're using someone else's code in some way. They're crawling the web, whatever thing it is. Guys like Mark Zuckerberg was, I'm sure, breaking the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act left and right when he was a college student. But once they get big, suddenly they're using this law to go after people who might become competitors to them. And I've talked to people in Congress who are already getting calls from partners in law firms, jawboning them about how this will be a threat to the success of these internet companies. Yeah. And so there's another flank for this fight, which is to get these companies on board and basically call them out, because none of them publicly want to oppose a law like this, but privately a lot of them are throwing their weight to try to stop it. And I think you should, of course, we got to get every member of Congress we can publicly signed on to support it, to co-sponsor it. In Massachusetts, I think we'll have a pretty good shot at that. And you should call your members of Congress to do that. But then I would say, go online, tweet, write, create public petitions. Your favorite tech companies, go after Google, go after Facebook, and call on them to support Aaron's Law. Because if industry gets behind it, and especially if we can help the Obama administration feel like this is a public accountability issue, I think we have a really good chance of passage.
So just for people who don't know what's in the law, what does it contain? Like, what are some of the protections? Like, what kind of stuff is in there?
Sure. So the number one thing is this pretty basic and pretty crazy thing about the way that computer crime law works right now, which is that unauthorized access to a computer is a federal felony. And what is unauthorized access? Unauthorized access is access that violates a website's terms of service, which is basically like the multi-page document that nobody has ever read in the history of the universe. And what it means, that that's a felony, is that regular computer users all over the place count as felons. If the government wants to go after them, it can shut down basically anyone. Wow. So it's like really, really crazy.
What if my terms of service are like, you have to give me $1 million?
Right.
Sign here.
There's a law blogger who wrote a blog post, and he said, starting today, my terms of service are that you can't access this website unless if you're wearing underpants. He said, congratulations, you're a felon.
I mean, it's crazy.
It's crazy, and it was set. This law was passed in 1986 at a time when there was no internet. There were no websites, and it was created when people thought unauthorized access meant something totally different.
Yeah.
But the law, essentially, it's been helpful to prosecutors to have it be so wide open, and so it stayed this way. And instead of being used to crack down on people selling millions of credit cards to the Romanian mafia or whatever.
Yeah.
It's
that's
also
hard.
used to go after guys like Aaron.
Yeah, because that's hard. That's hard to do, to catch the real criminals on the internet.
Yeah.
So they'd rather go after the activists on the journalists.
Yeah, I mean, it's low-hanging fruit, right? They go after people who they can beat and people who, spook their bosses, essentially.
Yeah.
And, Aaron was, like, one of the wonderful things about him was he was unafraid to challenge unjust systems.
Yeah. I'd really be interested to see what the kind of communications, now that you mentioned that, like, scaring the boss, you know what I mean, the person who's whoever in charge of the attorney, or the prosecutor, like what kind of communications between the two of them about Aaron, like, whether they were out in that kind of vendetta sense,
Yeah, listen, this is something that I want to see too, and Aaron's family and Aaron's partner Taryn, like, we all really want to see this stuff. And right now, one thing your listeners should know is that the documents from the case are under a protective order from the judge, basically meaning that they're not being publicly released.
Wow.
And that public order can be listed.
Yeah.
But it would take, either the judge making the decision or the different parties to the investigation, saying they're cool with it. So this is something MIT and JSTOR can help with right now. And, phone calls to them and pressure to them can really help. I know that there are, investigative reporters that are looking into this. People are filing FOIA requests. It's possible that the Massachusetts state legislature will do an investigation. They could pull out a lot of information. And also, Congress might investigate this too.
Awesome.
And those things are really important.
We need to
Congress
do this.
investigates a lot of things.
Let's protest at MIT. Let's find out what JSTOR is. Let's do this.
Well, that's the thing. Like,
I'm
sure, like, the family must know people, like, within MIT and within JSTOR that are sympathetic, right, to the cause. I mean, because JSTOR just released all the information. I mean, they realized, hey, this was the right thing to do, right? And
yeah, JSTOR really, I got to say, did the right thing here. JSTOR, during the investigation, it publicly said it did not want this prosecution to go forward. It didn't support the charges. It did a beautiful statement right after Aaron died, and days before that, it made millions of documents available to everybody. There's still some paywalls. I mean, I think I would love JSTOR to shift from the kind of guarding the walls business to the, like, figuring out how to tear walls down business. But they're not the bad guys here. But MIT, and it's kind of it's hard. It's painful to think about why. But MIT has consistently stonewalled Aaron and his family and the defense team. And now they're doing this investigation, but they said it was going to come out after a few weeks, and it's been 5 weeks yesterday, and I know a lot of people that they haven't interviewed yet. It seems like they're kind of dragging their feet, and it's all fine. And if they come out with a real serious hard look at themselves, and they really try to make amends and make some reforms, then I'll be the first to applaud them. But right now, there's a little bit of a whiff of a stalling tactic of wanting to, move this to an investigation and have it go away, and that's just not acceptable.
Do you think that they're doing that because they have a vested interest in, that kind of status quo that keeps information private and allows for them to profit off of it as a corporation?
I think that and I think this is often true with institutions like this, I think they are internally split. I think if you look at, like, the general counsel and vice president, Greg Morgan, his office, first of all, there are a lot of things that happened that it doesn't want to see be made public, and I think there are people who are trying to protect their own jobs. And secondly, MIT gets enormous contracts, from the kind of military-industrial complex, from national security apparatus, and also from big tech companies and big biotech companies.
A lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure, right?
Yep.
On the other side of the coin, most of the faculty, most of the students, many of the alumni, including many major donors, feel very strongly that MIT should be a bastion of open inquiry, of pushing the envelope, and that's what's made MIT great. And
exactly.
I think that they basically have a decision about what kind of place they want to be, what their soul really looks like, and it's so far it hasn't looked good, but I want them to understand exactly how big the stakes are for them, and I want them to make the right decision.
Yeah, go MIT. I hope MIT does it right.
I'll tell you something that MIT can do. I mean, they certainly need to unearth exactly what happened here. They need to hold accountable people who made, horrible decisions. But what MIT should do after that is essentially become the world's champion of open access to academic information. Because this is exactly the kind of challenge that MIT is made for. It's a technical challenge about how do you coordinate, journal review and publishing and all this stuff without it costing so much that you have to charge to be able to make it work. And MIT could actually change the world in a big way and essentially do what Aaron dreamed of doing, which is to make sure that every piece of research is available to everyone on Earth for free instantly. Like, why not do that? It'd be a beautiful thing. And if they did that, the people in Aaron's world, myself included, we'd be there at the ribbon cutting. We'd be so excited and happy for that to happen. That would be a beautiful testament, and would also be something that would make it'd be the kind of bold, positive act that I think would allow MIT to move back into a moral high ground from a very low place where they are right now.
Well, let's hope that they do that.
Let's hope they do. Right. You're listening to Unregular Radio's Two Hotheads, where activism happens. We're on the phone with Ben Wikler, friend of Aaron Swartz. So your radio show, Ben.
Yeah.
Are you coming back with it?
Yeah, so if you go to flamingswordofjustice.com, you can sign up for our email alerts. And we're going to send out a note soon, probably this coming Wednesday. We're going to have our first episode, and pretty soon it's going to be daily from 3 to 4 p.m.
Wow.
And we're going to, in the first episode, we're going to tell the story of the show, tell the story of Aaron's role in the show, and then we're going to get into it. And part of the idea of the show is to essentially work with activists all around the U.S. and around the world who are in the midst of the most important fights, to let our audience know what's happening, kind of give a behind-the-slingshot view of David and Goliath battles, and then help people take action to help win. And so with Aaron's Law, there's pushing MIT, there's pushing for accountability for the prosecutors, there's passing Aaron's Law and changing the Computer Fraud Act, and then there's the broader fight of trying to reform this broken criminal justice system, and we'll be taking on all that in the show, day to day. So people will be able to not just get informed, but they'll find ways that they can be part of the movements to fight for justice that all of us stand for.
That's awesome. I'm glad to see it. I like your show. I just discovered it. I discovered you. I want to thank Taryn and thank you for being on the show today. And I'm just, we can't cover this enough. That's my opinion on this.
Listen, man, I'm with you, and I appreciate it. It's easy. There's a lot of people who would like this whole thing to go away. Let me put it that way. They'd like the memories to fade. They'd like the anger to subside. But there's a lot that's wrong, and those are things that played a huge role in Aaron's death. And we can honor him, and we can help pick up the torch. We can keep the fight going that he was so deeply committed to. By talking about this, keeping this alive, going to those protests, going on Monday at noon to the Coakley Courthouse,
yep.
Moakley Courthouse.
That's right, and then the second Monday after that, every 2 weeks,
Yeah.
Every 2 weeks.
Until
right.
we get some answers, until they release those documents, right?
And start doing
That's
these.
right.
Yeah, I want to see these protests going on everywhere too, like other cities. Like
It's public information. I mean, but then a lot of times, though, these people, these prosecutors, or these people in government, they can hang on those memos, So who knows what's in there?
I know.
Really,
we got to get those memos released.
Yeah. The information has got to get out about this, and when it does, there'll be a lot of people with a lot to answer for, and that's appropriate. Like one thing to keep in mind here is this is about Carmen Ortiz and Steve Hyman, but it's also much bigger than that, because what we need to show essentially is that prosecutors aren't immune. They are accountable for their actions, and they wanted to make an example of Aaron. They wanted to teach a lesson to people who might try to spread academic information to people everywhere. Well, they actually need to be an example to prosecutors and people with power across the country, that they don't have a blank check. They don't have unlimited license to go after whoever they want. They actually have to be serving the public. That's their job. And if they walk away from this after what they did, that'll be another injustice that'll compound it. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think it's all of our job to make sure it doesn't.
I agree. That's like, we need to get this information out for future citizens too, so that people know exactly how they operate. This is bigger than just the people involved. It's systemic on how the justice system works.
That's so right. And Aaron, something Aaron was very conscious of, and I think one of the things that really weighed on him when he got to this point of having to ask people for help, to ask people to donate to his defense, all this stuff, is that Aaron was unlike most people who are victims of the broken parts of the system. Because Aaron, he was white, he was a male, he had powerful friends, he had money, he had all the advantages, and most people who prosecutors go after don't have any of those things. Aaron had some of the best defense attorneys in the country. There's so many people with terrible, underfunded, overloaded, state-appointed attorneys. There's so many advantages that Aaron had, and the fact that it was this broken dealing with someone like Aaron just gives a taste of the kind of terror that so many people feel. How many people plead guilty to crimes they didn't commit because they know that they could never win at court?
I know.
I think that totally just goes to show, though, how the government does have the ability to go after powerful people or bankers, like we were talking about earlier. Not a single banker jailed, right? But they can go after Aaron because he violated the terms of service. And so they have the apparatus, they have the mechanism to do it to anyone, but they choose to take the easy targets, like we've been talking about on the show, and then make examples of people like Aaron who try to do the right thing.
Yeah. That's exactly right. I mean, it makes you miss Elliot Spitzer.
I know. Seriously. And some of the other people would lose, like Ron Paul and Dennis Kucinich, and but I was happy to see Elizabeth Warren coming out strong. I'm happy.
That hearing. I got it. Aaron was very involved with the Consumer Financial Protection Board. He was right when we moved into this office next to each other, he was really involved in the fight to create the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and then to get Elizabeth Warren as the head of it. He'd started this petition to appoint her to the lead role, and he was really fighting. And Warren learned all about him and really appreciated the work he was doing on that. And boy, there's everyone's complicated, but I'm really proud of him for his role in that, because I think I don't know if this has been mentioned anywhere, but Elizabeth Warren came to the memorial for Aaron in D.C. This was a couple weeks ago. It was in a House office building, and there were, I think, 2 or 3 senators and 5 members of the House. Elizabeth Warren came and sat there. She didn't speak. We asked if she wanted to, and she said no, she just wanted to listen. She never checked her BlackBerry. She never was conferring with her aides. She just sat there and listened to the whole thing. And she was nodding, and she was crying, and she, you could see that she was taking it in as a human being.
Wow.
And that, politicians don't normally do that.
Yeah.
It was a long event, and that really impressed me about her. And it clearly sunk in after what she said at this hearing with these bankers. So
yeah.
I'm hoping to see a lot more like that from her.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Absolutely.
I mean, that kind of woke me up. I was like, wow, that's.
I hope she does it, though, because it's just so many times you're let down by politicians, even if they have a human side. They have people to answer to. And,
listen, that's true, but FDR, I don't know the exact. I always forget who the exact people were, but there was some point after he was elected president, he called a bunch of kind of activists and labor leaders into his office, and they said, "Hey, where's this legislation you promised us?" And he said, "Look, now I'm in office. Your job is to make me do it."
Yeah.
And I think that's the lesson. Politicians let you down exactly to the extent that you let them let you down.
Yeah.
And our job as citizens is to, is to hold them to the standards they should be held to.
Yeah. No, that's an excellent insight.
But
Kennedy said that too.
Yeah, and I also think too, in this example, I think she was touched, like Ben said, by this instance. A lot of times with marijuana reform, there's a moment when people wake up because their family member ends up using medical cannabis or something like that. You make up your life decisions and come to an experience. And I think that with Elizabeth Warren, this is great news. I'm very happy to see. I want to see more of this. I want to see more of these representatives in Congress, because I was happy to see that we're getting this hearing, and I think we're making progress on it. So I think it's exactly what Ben said. We need to be louder than ever. We need to really get loud on this issue.
Yep.
Absolutely right.
For everyone, for the future.
That's so right.
The next Aaron that comes along.
Thank you for coming in, calling in today.
Hey, it was really a pleasure talking to you guys. Thanks for all you're doing.
Yeah, thank you very much.
That was Ben Wikler. We're two hotheads where activism happens. We go along, and then we get awkward sometimes.
Well, we're getting real, you know?
Yeah.
We're getting serious. We're having real conversations with people, you know?
I know.
You know? And
we go along. We get into it. We don't give a fuck.
Right? I mean, but you wanted that. I mean, that's all. We just had a great conversation with that guy.
Oh, yeah. I was almost crying.
And no, because it's emotional stuff, you know, because, you know, this is a guy, Aaron Swartz, who put, you know, his heart and soul into making the world a better place, you know? And to just see him so spiritually crushed by just an evil, you know, machine that just is looking for quotas and you know, trophies on the wall and status quo is disgusting.
Real people, real life, and
it is sad. It's horrible.
Sad.
You know?
And when you look at like exactly what we talked about, we've talked it, but you can't say it enough. Like how he lifted people.
Yeah. I mean, it's an inspiring story, you know, the kind of life that he lived, you know, and it's something that, you know, as an activist, you know, that's how I'd like to be, you know what I mean? I'd like to be able to, like, be that kind of soothsayer or wisdom kind of, like, you know, filled person that can just kind of help in every way and guide just and shape humanity, you know what I mean, and in a better way that's going to allow for people to like have the tools to make a difference.
Yep. And even in like simple ways, like it doesn't have to be like people get carried away sometimes and quit their jobs.
Like I just did.
Did you get carried away? No, not in the show. I'm talking about life. Like
yeah.
You know, you gotta make money. You gotta survive. But like you can do a day a week. You know, like how much can you do in a day? Like you
do a lot if you really put time into it. You know what
I've been doing that for a long time.
Do you ever wake up early and like get a bunch of stuff done in the morning?
Just talk about a day a year. Like for the last year, I've probably done 100 interviews. Yeah. Like, seriously, in the newspaper is like, you know, like one day a week.
Yeah.
And the show.
Side note here, I'm really impressed with this kid Adam. Sounds like he does come from a privileged background. Nothing against that, but the people that grow up with that don't necessarily always have the values that say, you know, I want to make information free to everybody.
Yeah.
Level the playing field. He has concern for people in worse off situations.
Absolutely.
Something like that. It's impressive. It reminds me of Buddha, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Well, yeah, just someone with ethics. You know,
it's true because like usually people
is a human.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to, you know, maintain ethics about it when you're constantly on the front lines of poverty and whatever you might have coming out in life, but to not have that problem with anything, getting a job or doing anything like that, and still wanting to help out others in that sense, and it's impressive.
Yeah. Well, I think once you start to get a taste of it, I don't know. It's like contagious in a way.
I started out very, very young too. So obviously
I think sometimes if you have a gift, I don't know. It's a weird thing. I almost look at it like when you start like thinking about life, it's like why not do good? You only have a short time,
right? You know, why not just try to just leave it better? You know, leave it better than you found it. Yeah. You know, that's all we can try to do.
Make it a game if you want. Like if you need to make it like a game, make it a game.
Yeah.
You know,
but realize whose side you're on. You know, and what side you're playing for. You know,
it's like I don't know the work that we do. Like today's show, I'm into this shit. Like we're gonna. We want to get the TSA out of the MPTA.
Yeah, we still got that.
We want to legalize marijuana. Yep. We want to make sure we have our medibles.
We want to get the drones out of the sky.
We want to get the drones out of the sky. We're going to get into that. And we want to make sure that Aaron's bill gets passed. We want to watch these hearings. We want to get that information released on Carmen Ortiz.
Yep.
We want her out of office.
Her and Hyman,
we're going to be supporting the marches every 2 weeks.
That's right.
Starting this Monday.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
A lot of shit going on.
Show me the papers. Show me the papers, Carmen. Show me the papers.
Bring on the matches.
And the banks.
Yeah.
And Iceland.
Oh, Iceland, man. Oh, yeah. Woof. Iceland's getting it done.
Yeah.
Over there. Well, they only have 310,000 people, though, you know.
Yep.
So it's a lot easier for Iceland to get it done than it is for us to get it done. You know what I mean?
Pots and pans and tomatoes. You need a lot of tomatoes. They're going to have to ship them in through Walmart. So we should also, you know, mass elections.
It's happening.
We're emailing people. Some people calling people. We're like everyone else trying to find out who's actually running for Mass Senate. Mm-hmm. We know some candidates. We know some others who aren't. So much to get into. And our calls to them and some of them that might come on, some of the politicians we have on this show. We're in campaign season again, so we have a lot to talk about when we come back.
Yeah, surely do.
What do we and we could talk about Alex Jones too.
Oh yeah, brother.
but I don't want
I'm
it.
so real.
That shit's getting old.
Yeah,
I know
Alex,
people like
you know,
it on YouTube, but
I love Alex.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
yeah.
Alex, you know, I love him. I'd have a beer with him. We'd probably get
Yeah,
along great, you know?
I'd do a good video with him.
But, like,
He'd
Alex,
probably want
I
to
just-
fight me in, though, and I'd
you
beat
know,
him up.
Please put down the foghorn, sir.
I just don't believe the government's going to, like, kick in my door
Megaphone.
right now. I just, like... But I love you, Alex. I love you. Anyone that's an info warrior, no doubt, you know, you're fighting the good fight. Just grain of salt a little bit. That's all.
Turn it down to 5.
That's all.
617-606-3700. If you want to talk to us when we get back, give us a call. We're going to listen to some music. What are we listening to, Rob?
I don't know. Nirvana?
Yeah.
And can we talk about when you're going to get us that Jay Severin clip for next week?
Oh, you get a sweet
Can
Jay
we do
Severin
that?
clip?
Will you allow that?
Play
Will
the
you do
clip?
the Jay Severin?
want
Oh,
me
you
to
have
play
Fuck it, we'll do it live.
That's what we try to do.
The Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah.
That's classic.
I know. I was like,
The whole
what?
thing fucking sucks.
It fucking sucks.
That's awesome. We got some music, though, here at Two Hot Heads.
Call up, say hi.
Coming up.
Boston Uncensored Radio.